Welcome to this explainer. All right, we are jumping right in today because we are breaking down the massive, rapidly evolving world of unmanned vehicles. And we're moving way beyond those basic commercial quadcopters you see buzzing around the park on a Sunday. We're looking at a full-blown technological revolution that is completely reshaping how we map, protect, and interact with our world.
I mean, seriously, what if your drone was literally the size of a dragonfly? Or what if it could dive 300 feet underwater? Today, these machines are farming equipment, they're deep-sea explorers, weapons of war, and even autonomous lifesavers. Because of intense industry demands, their physical forms and capabilities have splintered off into some radically different, absolutely fascinating directions.
Because we have a ton of technological ground to cover, here is our roadmap to unpack this whole ecosystem. We'll start with seeing the invisible, move into mastering the skies, break down the military classification system, go from deep sea to micro, and finally wrap up with the hive mind.
Okay, up first, seeing the invisible with sensor anatomy. You really can't appreciate what these things can do until you understand the sensors themselves. Honestly, the drone is kind of just the delivery vehicle. Moving past your standard visible light RGB cameras, we've got multispectral sensors. These capture near-infrared light, which actually lets farmers calculate plant stress long before a human eye could ever see it. Then, of course, you've got thermal sensors for reading heat patterns, and then there's LiDAR. LiDAR is wild. It uses millions of laser pulses to map hyper-accurate 3D representations of terrain, and it shoots straight through dense vegetation. Sure, it's expensive and complex, but the data you get, absolutely unmatched.
To really ground this tech in reality, let's talk about how thermal sensors, detecting invisible heat signatures, are literally saving lives. In 2023, emergency responders in Ireland were looking for a missing 82-year-old man in the pitch black of night. Instead of trying to coordinate a massive, incredibly slow ground search, they put up a drone. The thermal camera sliced right through the total darkness and picked up his body heat in a field just minutes after launching. This right here, this is why sensor technology matters. It's quite literally the difference between life and death.
Let's keep moving. Section 2, Mastering the Skies Through Flight Evolution.
Mastering the skies is all about overcoming those classic aviation bottlenecks: battery life, weight, and aerodynamics. For years, operators had a really tough choice to make. You could use multi-rotors, which are amazing for precision hovering and maneuvering in tight spaces, but they absolutely chew through battery life. Or you could use fixed-wing drones. Those give you incredible long-range efficiency, but they need runways or catapults to take off and a ton of space to land. So engineers had a massive headache. How do we merge these physical advantages into one single machine?
Enter VTOL technology. VTOL stands for Vertical Takeoff and Landing, and it is a total game changer. These hybrid aircraft completely eliminate the need for runways. They use rotors to lift straight up off the ground, exactly like a multi-rotor. But once they get up in the air, they seamlessly transition and use their wings to glide horizontally. This means they can maintain unbelievable range and operational efficiency, flying for dozens of miles while still being able to drop down and land in a tight forest clearing or right on a ship's deck.
And this physical evolution isn't just about slicing through the air, it's about brute force, lifting heavy payloads. These massive heavy-lift agricultural drones are completely rewriting the rules of the farming industry. Outfitted with precision sprayers, some of these autonomous beasts can cover up to 70 acres of crops in a single hour. 70 acres! And with centimeter-level accuracy, too. Something that used to take a whole crew all day with a tractor is now being done from the sky, safely, efficiently, and with way less chemical waste.
All right, Section 3, the military classification system. Let's talk about tiers of power. Shifting our focus over to the defense sector, we really need to understand how the military categorizes these rapidly advancing unmanned aerial vehicles. We're moving way beyond crop sprayers now. The U.S. Department of Defense uses a 5-group classification system, and it's fascinating because it tracks the escalation of power perfectly. Group 1 is the small stuff, under 20 pounds, operating below 1,200 feet. Think of the hand-launched RQ-11 Raven Scout drones. But then you jump all the way up to Group 5, and we are talking about massive, incredibly sophisticated aircraft. Things like the MQ-9 Reaper and the Global Hawk. These are flying way up above 18,000 feet, they can stay airborne for over 24 hours straight, and they are the backbone of modern global strategy.
Moving on to Section 4, from deep sea to micro, pushing the absolute extremes. Because, the evolution of these machines isn't always about getting bigger or flying higher. Sometimes it's about pushing the limits of just how tiny they can get to survive hostile environments. In stark contrast to those massive Reapers we just talked about, consider the military's Black Hornet nano drone. It weighs a staggering 18 grams.
18 grams. And yes, that includes the battery. It's literally the size of a small bird. Originally developed in Norway, this micro-drone can fly for 20 to 25 minutes. It lets soldiers scout ahead, look around corners, or peer over walls in dense urban combat zones without the enemy ever knowing they're there. Oh, and it packs night vision capabilities too. Unbelievable.
And hey, let's not forget, these machines aren't just conquering the sky. Remotely operated underwater vehicles, or ROVs, are dominating the deep. These are tethered, highly maneuverable submersibles diving hundreds of meters into our oceans. They're performing super dangerous industrial inspections on offshore energy platforms, tracking underwater pipelines, and exploring deep-sea shipwrecks. They handle the heavy, highly dangerous lifting way down in the depths without a single human diver ever having to get wet. They're unlocking the 71% of our planet that's covered by water.
Finally, Section 5. The hive mind. Thousands acting as one.
We have officially reached the climax of this technological evolution. We are moving entirely away from piloting single units and stepping right into the era of the network, drones that think, fly, and act collectively. To give you a true sense of scale here, during a recent National Day celebration, a light show in Shenzhen Bay Park coordinated an awe-inspiring 10,197 autonomous drones. They were forming massive animated 3D images across the night sky. And here's the craziest part. That entire fleet of over 10,000 flying robots was controlled and flown from just a single computer. Let that sink in.
So you're probably wondering, how is that even computationally possible? Well, to coordinate swarms of that size, programmers are explicitly mimicking biological behaviors found in nature. It's called biomimicry. They use algorithms inspired by ant foraging trails, where drones leave invisible digital pheromones to optimize flight paths. They use the Firefly algorithm, where drones adjust their position by flocking toward peers that have the brightest or most optimal solution to avoid an obstacle. They are literally crowdsourcing intelligence in midair. They're behaving just like a school of fish or a flock of birds, requiring barely any human input at all.
And when you apply this biomimicry to defense, things get incredibly serious. In advanced military applications, like the U.S. Department of Defense's PERDIX system test, which involved over 100 microdrones, this swarming behavior creates a unified, self-healing hive mind. Because there is no central leader drone calling the shots, there's no single point of failure. If one unit drops out, runs out of battery, or gets destroyed, it doesn't matter. The rest of the swarm instantaneously communicates, adapts, and just seamlessly continues the mission.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a thought. We've seen drones that can map invisible heat in the dead of night, hybrids that take off without runways, submersibles diving to the ocean floor, and self-healing swarms acting as a single brain. The infrastructure is being laid down right now for these machines to handle our logistics, our agriculture, our security, and our data. So ask yourself, what happens to our world, our airspace, and our daily lives when the sky is fully populated by autonomous, self-healing swarms? The tech isn't decades away, it's already here. The only question now is how quickly we adapt to it. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally stripping away the science fiction to look at the very real present of modern warfare. We are talking about lasers, specifically directed energy weapons, or DEWs. We're going to look at the catalysts driving this rapid technological evolution and the cures that militaries are deploying to protect the skies. We'll break down exactly how this technology actually works, who is building it, and why it is fundamentally changing the entire calculus of global security. Let's dive in. To understand why this shift is happening so incredibly fast, we have to look at recent events. During Operation Sindor, a frankly staggering number of tactical aerial threats were deployed. We're talking over 600 drones sent into the airspace. Think about the sheer volume of that for a second. This wasn't just a handful of isolated reconnaissance flights. This was a massive, coordinated wave designed specifically to overwhelm standard air defenses. When you're facing over 600 incoming targets simultaneously, the entire paradigm of how you defend your airspace is forced to shift instantly. And really, that brings us to the absolutely critical question facing modern defense strategists today. How do you stop a drone swarm? You know, when the sky is just filled with hundreds of cheap, autonomous, and deadly threats, firing off multi-million-dollar traditional missiles at every single one of them isn't just economically unsustainable, it's practically impossible. You are going to run out of ammunition long before that swarm runs out of drones. This one massive problem is exactly what has accelerated the push toward high-tech, unconventional solutions. So, let's get into Section 1, the drone swarm threat. The modern battlefield looks vastly different than it did even a decade ago.
We aren't just dealing with large manned fighter jets or massive ballistic missiles anymore. Instead, we're seeing the unprecedented use of AI-driven drones and loitering munitions. And let me be clear, these aren't just remote-controlled toys. They are highly sophisticated, networked machines. They can linger in the airspace, identify their targets autonomously, and strike with absolute lethal precision. They're designed to fly low, completely evade traditional radar, and strike in synchronized groups, which just completely disrupts conventional military defenses.
Imagine being a radar operator and seeing this headed your way. During Operation Sindor, they didn't just throw numbers at the problem. They used some seriously sophisticated tactics. We saw unmanned dummy aircraft sent out specifically to deceive enemy radar and force them to waste defensive ammunition. We saw massive coordinated drone swarms, not just random clusters. And maybe most importantly, these swarms used AI-powered flight paths. That makes them completely unpredictable and incredibly difficult for a human operator to track and intercept. This right here is why a totally new approach to air defense is just urgently necessary. Which leads us to Section 2, soft kill versus hard kill. So when militaries face these highly intelligent swarms, they generally lean on a two-pronged strategy, soft kills and hard kills. Now, a soft kill doesn't actually blow up the drone. Instead, it kind of severs the drone's invisible connection to its controller or its navigation system. This involves jamming the Global Navigation Satellite System, or GNSS, and disrupting radio frequencies. It basically blinds and confuses the drone, which either causes it to drop right out of the sky or just turn around and return to base. A hard kill, on the other hand, is all about physical destruction. This is where you actually blow it up or literally burn it out of the sky, using traditional kinetic weapons or increasingly directed energy weapons like high-powered lasers. It's really fascinating to see how these systems are layered together into a single integrated shield. Let's put these engagement ranges into perspective. Take systems like India's DRDO-D4, which stands for Drone, Detect, Deter, and Destroy. It uses an active phased array radar to detect smaller aerial threats from up to 20 kilometers away. That gives operators a massive 3D picture of the entire airspace. Then, once a threat closes in to about 2 to 4 kilometers or so, the soft kill jamming systems kick in. But if a drone manages to push through that jamming and gets within 1.25 kilometers or so, that's when the laser-based hard kill systems take over to literally burn it out of the sky.
Okay, Section 3, how directed energy works.
We know when the laser fires, but let's actually talk about how it fires. It's so cool to strip away all that sci-fi jargon and just look at the raw physics of it. It's not magic, right? It's essentially a highly weaponized flashlight. The whole process breaks down into 4 really precise steps. First up, photon generation. You pump electrical energy into an active optical medium, like a crystal. Second is the photon cascade. That energy excites the medium, making it emit photons, which are basically just particles of light. Third is amplification. Those photons start bouncing back and forth, multiplying exponentially. And finally, Step 4, beam formation. A portion of those super concentrated photons is allowed to escape, and that forms your devastatingly powerful, narrow beam of light. To really visualize this, look at what happens inside the optical cavity. Those photons are essentially trapped. You've got a full mirror on the left and a partial mirror on the right. The photons travel back and forth through that gain medium right in the center, exciting more and more atoms, and creating that cascading amplification we just talked about. The light becomes completely uniform in its wavelength and direction. When the pressure gets immense, it punches right through that partial mirror on the right, heading straight toward the target. It delivers such intense heat that it can melt through the wings or the internal electronics of an incoming drone in just seconds. You might be wondering, why go through all this trouble to build these things? Well, the advantages are just staggering. First off, you're engaging targets at the actual speed of light. There's no trying to lead the target or calculating wind drop like you have to do with a standard bullet. Second, the cost per shot is insanely low. It's essentially just the cost of the electricity to run the generator. We're talking pennies compared to $1 million missile. Third, these beams are often completely invisible and silent, making it a perfectly stealthy defense. And finally, there is zero explosive collateral damage. That is absolutely crucial when you are trying to defend civilian infrastructure or urban areas. Moving right along to Section 4, India's indigenous defense tech. Understanding the physics is great, but seeing it deployed on the ground is something else entirely. Let's look at the Mk2A.
This was developed under Project Sahastra Shakti by the DRDO. And guys, this isn't just theoretical on a whiteboard somewhere. It was successfully demonstrated in early 2025 at the National Open Air Range. It's a vehicle-mounted directed energy weapon pushing out 30 kilowatts of power. It pulls this off by combining 6 separate 5-kilowatt laser beams into one highly focused strike. During its testing, it successfully tracked and neutralized UAV swarms. It blinded optical systems and proved that having a mobile, high-power laser defense is incredibly effective against these coordinated drone attacks. And honestly, the Mk2A is just the beginning of a super aggressive development pipeline. DRDO kicked things off with the Mk1 back in 2024. Now here in 2025, we've got the 30-kilowatt Mk2A. But looking ahead, they're already developing Durga 2. That's a 100-kilowatt system explicitly designed for much heavier threats like artillery shells. And slated for 2027, Project Surya. This thing is an absolute behemoth, targeting 300 kilowatts of power, designed to neutralize supersonic missiles and high-speed fighter jets from up to 20 kilometers away. The scaling of this tech is happening at absolute breakneck speed.
But here's the catch. All that immense laser power is totally useless if you can't aim it fast enough. That's where the private sector comes into play. Zen Technologies, an Indian defense firm, recently unveiled a fully integrated counter-drone system that leans heavily on artificial intelligence. Their system can detect smaller threats from 15 kilometers away, but crucially, it can simultaneously track more than 100 UAVs at the exact same time. Think about that. You literally need AI to process that sheer volume of tracking data instantly, deciding on the fly which drones to hit with soft kill jamming and which ones to pass off to the lasers for hard kills. Let's pull back a bit for Section 5, the global laser race. Of course, India isn't developing all of this in a vacuum. The global realization that traditional air defense is rapidly becoming obsolete has kicked off a massive race among major powers. We are effectively entering a modern Star Wars era. The United States currently leads the pack, having already installed systems like LAWS and the 300-kilowatt Helios on their naval warships to take out drones and fast attack boats. Russia has deployed their Perezvet system, which is incredibly advanced. It can actually target and dazzle satellites in orbit from altitudes up to 1,100 kilometers. They are also upgrading their traditional Panzer air defense systems with lasers. And, as we just covered, India is rapidly joining this very exclusive club with Project Sahastra Shakti. But we have to stay grounded, so here is Section 6, Limitations of Laser Weapons. Okay, before we get completely carried away with all the sci-fi appeal here, we have to look at reality. These weapons are incredible for sure, but they are still strictly bound by the harsh, unyielding laws of physics. Ironically, the biggest enemy of a multi-million-dollar military laser isn't a highly advanced drone, it's just a cloudy day. Atmospheric interference from heavy rain, thick fog, or dust scatters the photons, which drastically reduces the weapon's effective range and stopping power. Plus, lasers require a strict line of sight. You cannot shoot a laser over the horizon or over a mountain range. And to generate that much destructive light in the first place, you need massive power sources and immense cooling systems just to keep the equipment from melting itself. Finally, while the cost per shot is just pennies, the initial research and development and integration costs are astronomically high. So when you weigh these incredible new capabilities against the very real physical limitations, we're really left looking at the future of human conflict. When massive swarms of AI-guided drones render our traditional multi-million-dollar missiles totally inefficient, and the only viable countermeasure we have left is a concentrated beam of light, well, it forces a complete rethinking of military strategy. As AI and lasers continue to mature and ultimately dominate the skies, is the era of traditional kinetic warfare officially over? It's a permanent shift in how the world defends itself, and it is a reality we are stepping into right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's on the horizon.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer with a question that really anchors everything we're looking at today. In the event of an emergency, would your child actually know what to do? It's a heavy question, sure, but it's the absolute bedrock of what we're going to discuss.
Welcome to the explainer. Today we're diving into the universal need for proactive risk management. And look, preparedness is not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It's a massive spectrum. We're going to explore how different layers of society handle sudden extreme risks and see exactly what we can learn from all of them.
Here is our roadmap. We'll unpack this spectrum of preparedness by starting with everyday family life, moving into civilian survival tactics during aerial threats, and then scaling all the way up to protecting humanitarian responders in extreme conflict zones. Let's get into it.
We'll start small and anchor ourselves in a very familiar environment, your own home. Section 1. Family Preparedness Basics, Empowering the Household.
When we're talking about children, the goal is absolutely never to scare them. It's about empowering them, right? Teaching kids these foundational steps gives them courage instead of panic when things go sideways. It literally starts with the basics, teaching them to dial 911 and clearly state their location. Next, you've got to identify 2 exit routes for every single room in your house. And then, set up 2 meetup spots. One super close to home, like a specific neighborhood tree, and another one a bit further away, just in case the immediate area isn't safe.
Now here's a detail that is just brilliantly simple. A family safe word. Think about it. In a chaotic emergency, cell networks might go down, communication breaks. If a neighbor or a family friend needs to quickly grab your child for you, a safe word discreetly confirms that person's identity and intentions. It takes practically 0 effort to set up, but man, it adds a profound layer of security for your family.
All right, moving right along up the spectrum, let's escalate the threat level. Section 2, Surviving a Missile Strike, and what happens when threats escalate.
To really grasp civilian protocols for extreme, sudden threats, we can look at national alert systems, like Japan's J-Alert. During a ballistic missile strike, you might only have a 10-minute warning to react. Think about that. 10 minutes. The siren wails, an emergency news flash hits your phone, and from that exact second, hesitation is incredibly dangerous. In these scenarios, time is absolutely your worst enemy. Your physical response just has to be on autopilot. The guidelines in Japan break it down perfectly. If you're outside, sprint to a sturdy building or a basement. If you are already indoors, get away from the windows. Shattered glass becomes deadly during a blast, and move straight to a windowless room. And if you're caught completely out in the open with 0 cover nearby, you have to hit the ground, lay flat, and protect your head.
The World Health Organization actually has some very specific and honestly fascinating rules for surviving a bombardment. Yes, definitely build an ad hoc shelter out of tables and mattresses if that's all you've got. But here is a critical detail you might not know. You need to lie flat with your mouth slightly open. Doing that protects your lungs from the massive pressure of a blast wave. It could literally save your life. On the flip side, do not lean against solid walls. The earth shock or the violent percussion traveling right through the concrete can cause severe internal injuries. And I probably shouldn't have to say this, but definitely do not try to go outside and take photos of the air raid. Building on that, let's look at seeking engineered shelter when under direct fire. Section 3. Seeking proper shelter. The hierarchy of safety. Israel's Home Front Command outlines an absolute hierarchy for where to go, and it all comes down to speed. Your number 1 choice, a private reinforced safe room inside your home, known as a mamad, simply because it takes seconds to get there. Option 2 is a shared shelter in an apartment building. Option 3 is a public community shelter. But if you just can't reach any of those before the siren stops, your 4th option is an internal stairwell. It has to be windowless, with no external walls, and you ideally want to be on a middle floor, never the top floor and definitely not the ground floor, to avoid direct hits and shrapnel at the entrance. 10 minutes. This number is huge. The Homefront Command advises you absolutely must stay in that shelter for a full 10 minutes after the siren completely stops. Why? Well, the initial impact isn't the only threat. You are waiting out falling shrapnel from intercepted rockets, or even secondary drone infiltrations that could trigger multiple staggered alerts. Okay, so we've covered protecting ourselves and our families. But what about the people whose actual job is to stay behind? That brings us to Section 4. Protecting frontline responders, the ultimate escalation. There's a really stark imbalance in modern conflict zones that we need to talk about. When crises explode in places like Ukraine or Sudan, large international humanitarian groups often have to evacuate because of strict institutional security thresholds. But the local responders? They stay. Deeply rooted in their communities, they absorb this existential operational risk. They keep delivering aid under literal fire, often without the heavy protective resources of the international agencies that just packed up.
To survive that kind of environment, courage isn't enough. These local workers need advanced tools. In areas completely swarming with unmanned aerial vehicles, local responders are using frequency analyzers. These are non-emitting devices, meaning they pick up the signals of deadly drones nearby to give early warning, but they don't transmit any data that would give away the aid worker's own position. It's a critical game changer for situational awareness, letting a team know when to dive for cover before a strike actually hits.
And right alongside those early warnings, secure mobility is paramount. In places like Ukraine, driving through a contested area in a regular, unarmored car is basically a death sentence because of indirect fire, mines, and those drone strikes.
Armored vehicles are not just fancy prestige assets for international diplomats. For local volunteers, they are the literal difference between life and death. They are essential protective infrastructure if you want to pull off safe evacuations under fire.
This incredible risk burden brings us to our final paradigm shift. Section 5, a new duty of care, shared responsibility.
We really need to anchor our understanding in this concept called duty of care. Protecting these local workers is not some nice-to-have bonus feature. It is a strict ethical and legal imperative. If the big international organizations are going to rely on local networks to hand out life-saving aid, they have an undeniable responsibility to anticipate and mitigate the extreme physical and psychological risks those local actors are facing every single day.
This is where the Nonviolent Peace Force, or NP, really stepped up. They looked at this glaring disparity and realized that funding local partners to do dangerous work without physically protecting them is practically unethical. In response, they built a fully integrated, holistic duty of care model designed specifically for local first responders operating in active conflict zones.
Their package is incredibly comprehensive. It goes way beyond standard aid. We're talking PPE lending schemes, providing size-inclusive ballistic plates and helmets. But gear is useless if you don't know how to use it, right? So they pair that with acute trauma and first aid training. On top of that, they tackle the unseen toll of war with peer-based psychosocial programs to fight burnout and crucial digital hygiene tools like VPNs to protect these workers from state surveillance and digital harassment.
So here's the main takeaway for you. The entire future of humanitarian aid hinges on international systems actually sharing the danger, not just contracting it out. We have to move away from risk outsourcing, where massive agencies sit back in relative safety while local folks dodge missiles, and move toward true equitable risk sharing. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. We've journeyed from teaching our kids safe words at home to the stark reality of positioning our bodies during an air raid, all the way to properly equipping the heroes who run toward the danger. So as you think about your own family's preparedness, I want to leave you with this one provocative question. If emergencies strike without warning, are we actually doing enough to protect the people who stay behind? Thanks for exploring this vital topic with me, and stay safe out there.